Friends, family, fans, welcome back to another episode of Back Nine Bets, episode 141. Did we just become best friends? Spencer, Aguiar, alongside me. Looks like I'm lagging a little bit, but happy to have you on the show. We're going to rock guests on Back Nine Bets a little bit now and going to have a good chat with you all the way from Rotorball at PGA. What's cooking, my brother?
You know, Byron, this sort of a format that you do when you put you on stage with somebody is always my favorite version of you. So I think the show will be very successful having guests on it. And it's always a pleasure to do podcast work and all the written work that we did together at Rotoballer. Like we have quite the extensive back history with everything that we've done. So it's always a pleasure.
I had to repeat to myself multiple times. Don't start the show with, it is the Rotoballer PGA show, like we did for a year last year. And, you know, like, I couldn't choose a better guest. I knew exactly who I was going to ask first for my first guest appearance on the show, and I'm thrilled to have you on, my friend. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Spencer, at Tee of Sports on X, and we'll be putting in like a 2.5, 3 hour shift here on Mayo Media on a Tuesday night, going from my show straight to the draft, King of the Draft here at 9 Eastern after this. So we've got lots to chat about. It's the Memorial. Last week was the Charles Schwab. Anything exciting about the Charles Schwab that you want to chat about, Spence? Or is it kind of like me getting all cute with the Scotty Scheffler 3 places each way, and then he finished 4th after losing strokes putting? So it's just, I'm kind of in the mood to just move on from last week.
One of the things I always do, we talked about it a lot back in the day, is I like to run the baseline projections of what somebody's flat stick looks like compared to how they strike the ball. And Scotty Scheffler, unfortunately, should have won that golf tournament compared to those stats. So, you know, I don't know how well that bodes moving into a tournament that's tailor-made for him. That's my concern of getting a ton of exposure out onto the card this week. But no, I had a decent outright run at it. Did not have Griffin, so unfortunately it didn't amount to anything. Had Akshay make a little bit of a push there early on. Had Harry Hall, had JJ Spawn, but hitting an outright is very difficult. And unfortunately for me last week, it was a disastrous, would probably be the best way to describe it, Sunday, to where had Brian Harman in a couple iterations of matchups. He blew up on Sunday, ended up losing his 4-stroke lead that he had on Thorbjorn Olesen. Had Ricky Castillo in a round 4 matchup. He shot the worst round of the day at +7 after ball striking the hell out of it. So, you know, at the end of the day, you run the numbers how you want. Sometimes it works in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. But happy to get done with that tournament. Happy to move on to the Memorial, and it's a fun course. If nothing else this week, we will see how exciting of a tournament it ends up being if Scotty ends up running away with this.
Well, this is the one tournament, Spence, and I see someone mention commentating nerd. I think my microphone was on my camera, so it should be back on the Yeti. The sound should be a lot better now. Please let me know if that's not the case. But this is the one tournament, Spence, that I think Scotty Scheffler can be so dominant ball striking wise, tee to green, that he can lose strokes putting and still he finished second year last year, losing or a couple years ago where he second or third, losing 6 strokes putting or something absurd. It was one of the craziest performances from a guy that finished that far up the leaderboard. Career tee to green stuff, and then just couldn't figure it out, on the green. So Scotty has only lost putting twice this year, Spencer, last week and the API. So, I mean, his putting is he's unlocked a whole new level of his game. I think we could expect how many majors is Scotty Scheffler going to win in the next couple for the rest of his life, sitting with 3 right now.
It's gonna probably be a lot. I mean, the thing with golf though that I will point out is we have not seen these Scotty Scheffler runs, but we have seen golfers, whether it's Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, that have gotten hot for extended periods of time and then reverted backwards as time has moved on. I think the one difference here with Scotty is from a statistical perspective, I never thought the Spieth thing was sustainable. I never thought the Brooks Koepka thing was sustainable. From a statistical perspective, Scotty is so much better than everybody else. And I know we can make the argument that Rory made a push at the beginning of the year to get back into that range, but I don't know. I mean, he's almost feels like he's a lock for 1 a year at the bare minimum of the answer until this turns around. So my guess would be he probably ends up with the most of, if we want to say, the guys from Rory onto the new current guys. So whatever that number ends up being,
Spencer, you're not dancing around a number. I need a number for you. Over under Scotty Scheffler career majors.
What is Scotty right now? 28 years old? Is that
28?
I mean, I think the thing that you have to consider is, does he get more or less? Because at some point, the statistical profile has to dip off, or drop off, I would think. I would set the over under, and maybe this is an outrageous number I'm about to put out there. Maybe it's too low or too high, depending on what anybody's thinking. I would say that the over under would be like 8.5 for what I think he could potentially get to. Is like, you pull off one a year for a handful of years, all of a sudden you're in that 7, 8, 9 sort of a range. So I would set the over under at 8.5. I think with me always being the contrarian and the negative Nancy in a lot of these situations, I will take the under of that number and say that he ends up with 8, which might be a really, really low number. If he could win the next 2 and all of a sudden be up to 5, like just very quickly.
Yeah, I think if you were betting a Scotty Scheffler majors market, you'd want to take alt majors over kind of thing. Like just 10, 12, like what? Because the thing is, there's no one more dominant around Augusta right now than Scotty. I think it's almost like a freebie every, just not the defending champion. He's going to win one every other year. Like next year, it's his again. Like he was not playing nearly good enough entering Augusta this year and finished 4th. Like with these C+, B- game kind of situation. So, that I think over unders Masters green jacket, Spencer, currently sitting on 2.
What would you set it at?
4.5.
I mean, that is, it almost feels like, and I know he's good at every single course. It's not the same direct comparison here, but it's almost like, as you know, Byron, I used to play tennis back in the day. It's like the Rafael Nadal thing of when you throw him at the French Open, to where he's just so dominant on clay court there, to where he may pull off one or another in some of those majors, but you almost knew that he was a shoo-in to win the French Open over and over again. Golf is more difficult to pull that off. And I agree with you. Like, even if we look at it and say he wins, let's say he wins once every other year for the next 6 years, like all of a sudden he reaches the over of the total that you just said. So I don't know. It's probably pretty close to that number. And then it's how many does he pull off in these other spots? And can he capture the career Grand Slam? Because I was talking to my girlfriend about this like a week ago or so, and there is a legitimate world to where Scotty just plays absolute spoiler to the Rory McIlroy career Grand Slam. And he's like, yeah, well, hold my beer here. I'm going to now win the US Open. I'm going to now win the Open Championship. And now I'm going to have the career Grand Slam, and I'm going to put it all together in 1 year almost, outside of the Masters, which is not inconceivable. And if he does something like that, the over-under of how many majors he could get to is like certainly a shocking number.
Yeah, because then he would tie Rory's major total as well this year with the Slam. It would just be a total like fuck you moment, man. It would be insane, like for him to just totally hold my sweet tea, baby. I'm coming after you, and just have a bender of you. Do you think? I think his hardest major to win is going to be an Open Championship. He potentially might need like a Colin Morikawa type Open, where the wind's significantly lower. Where you can kind of target golf a little better, or he's going to just have to win the US Open and then just move to Europe, and just play links golf until he wins a major. So we'll see. But enough about Scotty. Let's chat about this week at the Memorial. No Rory. I'm going to share my screen, share the model. As always, you guys can see everything over on the Model Maniac Patreon over there. Use code Memorial25 for 25% off your first month over there. I've got the model pulled up. And Spencer, the most hilarious part about Scotty Scheffler over the last 12 months, if you've bet him to win $100 every single time he's played, you would have won $13 over that stretch.
Yeah.
He's just so fairly priced. It's just absurd.
It's the same answer. I saw this yesterday. I don't have the exact numbers up in front of me, but it's the Aaron Judge conversation that books have done, to where Judge had homered 15 times, 16 times, whatever the number was, 17 times. I don't know exactly where we're at right now, but in 50-something games. And if you would have bet him every single time that you had an opportunity to, and I don't know if it was to win a unit or you were betting a unit, you would have been down 7 units, though. And It's the unfortunate truth that has come into play with just sports books in general. I feel like you and I specifically on our Rotoballer show used to talk about this all the time, and we're seeing it even more so now. Books have gotten extremely sharp in the way that they price these lines. You see it from the outright market. It trickles all the way down now into the head-to-head sector, which used to not be the case. Books are very savvy of who they're placing against one another, and it just makes it more challenging to actually be able to extract out an edge when this is not some niche market anymore. This is a real market that they're putting resources into. You see it with the difficulty to beat it. And Scotty Scheffler specifically, he's going to be the favorite to win every golf tournament pretty much every single time he tees it up, which, kudos to anybody who bet him at the PGA Championship, because that was the first time we actually got, whether it was 5, 5.5, 6-1, whatever you got him out to. It's the first glimmer of light that there was actually a potential to bet Scotty if you wanted to go down that route. And, sometimes, and unfortunately for me in this, I took a Bryson DeChambeau number. I got it early in the week before that number dipped, and I felt good where I was at in the double-digit zone. And then by the time that tournament had started, it was like, Scotty's going to win this event, unfortunately, and this is going to all be for naught.
Yeah, dude. The Bryson situation was close, but no cigar. He's just not polished enough. He's just too raw. He's like untapped potential that he hasn't figured out how to like squeeze all into the test tube. Like when he's like pouring it in, he's like spitting shit everywhere, and it's not all in there, but he's still got the magic formula, which is the Bryson DeChambeau stuff that he's got. But yeah, very disappointing from him. It's just, I love how he's like, I need a golf ball that needs to fly straighter, but at the same time, he's just airmailing greens with pitching wedges. Like maybe just figure out how to hit your golf ball the same distance every single time you hit it. Like let the direction figure itself out. But anyway, Spencer, let's play a little bit of back or nine here on Back Nine Bets to start the show off. We'll kind of go down the board. I've got a couple bets I'm going to share with you guys. I'm going to share, if you feel free to share any bets that you're in the mood for as we're going down the board here. As always, we're not fading everyone here. I'm still going to be changing the color codes here. We're not noping the entire slate. We will be changing that as we go along this week in the Model Maniac Patreon there. But Spence, back or nine, let's just go off the top rope here. So back, you're going to back one of these golfers. Nine is German for no. You're going to say, no, I don't want this dude. And then the third option it's just going to be like a freebie, like you don't have to say anything about that guy. You can have a hard stance on someone, a fade on the other guy, and then the third dude can just be whatever. So let's just start right off with the top of the board here at the 10K range. Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas. No ownership involved. Let's go with a cash option. Back or nine, Scotty, Xander, JT at their current DK prices.
I will back Scotty. Right now, I see 42% ownership. It's hard to come onto a show. I'm the person that tries to be contrarian in these spots, and I actually think 42%, if it's anywhere near that, is a pretty low total from what we've seen from him. So, from an optimal sense, if you're trying to build an optimal lineup, I would say there are other routes you can consider going. There are names that I like further down beneath this range. And you can even play Scotty in some of those names, but Scotty's probably the most ideal optimal start to a build, even at that 40-something%. I'll say that I am neutral on Xander. I know the industry as a whole seems to be pushing pretty aggressively in the Xander route. I've seen his name a lot for outrights. It's been one of the names that has been mentioned to me the most. And if you're just looking within my model, he is second overall for me. He's a little bit worse than that when we look for upside. And for me, that is my biggest concern, is that you have a negative upside mark at $10,900. And I would rather either move up to Scotty there or move down to some of these players in the $9,000 range. I will say I am neutral, though, with that take. And then I guess for the sake of this conversation, I'll say 9 on Justin Thomas at $10,100, just because there are quite a handful of golfers, as I said, in that $9,000 range that I would rather get exposure to. But for me, at the end of the day, it's pretty much back Scotty, and then you could convince me to just not play either one of these other two guys and move elsewhere.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, Spence. Just look at what we're getting here. And I'm actually going to just follow that up with a different back or nine here. Let's go with back or 9 for a top 10 market, X, Tommy Fleetwood, or Corey Connors?
It's funny. I actually wrote about Tommy Fleetwood and Corey Connors in my Rotoballer article this week. And one of the things I talked about is when you look from an optimal roster construction standpoint here, a lot of people with Tommy Fleetwood and Corey Connors, their big concern is that the lack of win equity that they bring to the table. And I'm not going to sit here. I didn't bet them in the outright market. I'm not going to sit here and try to push anybody in the direction to back them in that sort of a market. But one of the arguments I did make is if you were looking for just safety and safety of these $9,000 plus golfers, I would say Fleetwood and Connors might be the two safest plays on the board. And when you have a tournament like this, and I'll get to the top 10 part of the question in a second, I just want to answer this from a DFS sense very quickly. But when you have such a difficult scoring course, that finishing position is going to matter this weekend. One of the arguments that I made for both Fleetwood and Connors is I could see both of them, or at least one of them, very easily being in the optimal lineup for the week. So I would probably prefer the Fleetwood Connors route. I still think Xander at the end of the day is a little bit boom or bust. We have seen it from a statistical perspective. He is extremely hot in one area and then goes cold somewhere else. And the argument to that would be if he ever can put the pieces together, extremely high upside at the end of the day. Like even if I talk about negative win equity in my model, he is still the third most likely player to win. I may think a proper price for him is more in that like 26 to 30 to 1 range, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have some massively overpriced commodity. But with that answer means that you're going to have worse prices in that top 10 sector. So he's just a little bit more mispriced for me. So I like the Tommy and Connors route if you're shooting for a top 10. I think with Xander, for me, he's probably just going to be a stay away, even though my model did like him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Xander entering the week with a career best finish at Muirfield of 8th only. He just never had it around this golf course anyway. And his best finish this year is an 8th at Augusta. You know, like he's only had one top 10 for course history and one top 10 for recent form. Like it's not lining up. And he's like 10-9, the second most expensive option. We all understand his potential. We all understand what he can do when he's playing like Xander of 2024. But this is Xander of 2025 who's recovering from a rib injury. And we saw it took Scotty almost 3 months to get his shit together, you know, after the season began. And he had his injury in Christmas time, you know, with the raviolis and stuff. So Xander's stuff happened a little later, and we might be seeing him firing it up eventually. But like you mentioned, the stat profile has just been everywhere. You know, it's just all over the goddamn place. He enters the week having like driven the ball ultra putridly, entering Quail or the PGA Championship, and was like top 3 in the field with a new driver in the back, you know, after his driver got tested. So that was absurd to see. But before we zip on to the next question, I have to mention that we are betting Scotty Scheffler top 5, minus 160. I understand that the market, last 12 months, you know, we've had some bad, that like stretch where Scotty was injured, he was still getting the same odds and they weren't cashing. But I mean, it's been the top 5 market for Scotty at this golf course. He's cashed out the last 3 years. The top 5 market for Scotty, he's cashed Houston, Masters, win, 4th. You know, I mean, it's just, I think, what would you set the Scotty Scheffler top 5 market at, Spence? I think minus 200 is almost even fair. You know, like I think it's just too consistent, especially at this golf course.
Do you know what his over-under finishing position is at any of those books out there?
Ooh, I don't. That's a good question. I would imagine if he's minus 160, that would probably make him like third, like a podium finish type situation.
Yeah, that's what I would think. I'm trying to find that answer as we look. I always lean in the direction of it being harder to land in those spots, which is why I never land on Scotty in these positions. But like, I don't have a pushback against it happening. Like his skill set, and I gave this answer when he won a couple weeks ago, and now we're doing it in even a better field. You look from a statistical profile, and this is through years of running models. There are a handful of examples where I can pinpoint a golfer who has been number 1 in every single statistical category that I've run, number 1 in course history metrics, number 1 on current form. It's pretty much Scotty Scheffler, the only one that's ever done that. And every time Scheffler's ever presented that profile, he seems to win at that tournament. And he has that exact profile here this weekend. One of the things I will say with Scotty, and this would almost just be a warning if nothing else on some of these bets here, you will notice books this week. It is Scotty versus insert player X, not Xander there, whatever player X is. It's over and over again of you're being baited in to, do you want Scotty at minus 300 or do you want the random player at plus 200 and something? You could not convince me to bet any of those players at that price. Like, if I'm going to bet them, I would rather just bet them to win the golf tournament, because it's kind of to your point, Scotty's probably coming top 5 in these positions. And if you're going to beat Scotty, you're competing to then win the tournament. Like, I would rather have whatever that number ends up being as an outright price there and kind of taking that route with it. And you can obviously bet Scotty without Scotty market with it. But I think that those bets they were kind of the first thing that I saw this week. To me, that is the ultimate trap that I like Colin Morikawa. We can get to Colin Morikawa in a second. Let me bet Colin Morikawa in another direction that's not directly head to head against Scotty.
Dude, exactly. And I think that is so funny, Spencer, like to take the person's outright instead of the matchup, because technically the only other person he could end up beating if he wins a tournament is the guy he would be in the matchup against, which is just absurd to think about. And that's just such a great way to go about that thought process. And as you mentioned, a massive trap for those guys. Yeah. Here's another back or 9 for the top 5 market. All these guys sitting roughly plus 200-ish in this, plus 300. JT plus 275, Colin plus 300, Patrick Cantley plus 300. Let's just all say they're plus 300 each. Where are we going in the top 5 market here, Spence, with JT, Kawa, and Cantley? Back or 9? Forget about the other guy.
So I will back Colin Morikawa. It goes back, like, I think from a statistical profile, there's a lot of people that are going to look at what he's just done recently, and there's going to be red flags in the profile. And I understand that. But if you dive a little bit deeper into what Morikawa has done long-term in these situations, you'll notice that he will lose in back-to-back starts more often than you think. And then when he pops, he ends up like winning the tournament perception-wise out of nowhere with this. And Morikawa is one of those names to where I feel like he wins when nobody's on him, and when everybody's backing him are the weeks where he ends up imploding on himself. And he was the first outright ticket that I punched this week. Like, it maybe is a little bit too aggressive, because you are taking on Scotty, and there's a lot of built-in exposure that comes into play with that. But I got him at 18-1. That was in an enhanced market if you shop around. So I think Morikawa is a name, if we're talking about even for DFS, very optimal sort of a build that you can make with him. I am neutral on Patrick Cantlay. And then I guess I'm going to just be the one that just continuously just keeps saying no to Justin Thomas here. And it's not that I dislike Justin Thomas necessarily. He's still within the top 10 of my model of all iterations of how I was looking at it. I think it just comes down to the discussion that you're having, to where we can only pick one of them. We're not going to play all of these names. You have to make decisions here. I am lower, or my model is at least lower on Justin Thomas. So don't necessarily think that this is some implosion spot for him. I know that we could talk about some of his lack of accuracy off the tee. I do think from a statistical perspective, there are reasons to potentially still like him. But like I said, like, if you're the 10th overall player in my model, when you are sub 20-1, depending on exactly what he's at, and he's $10,100, there's just other routes I would rather go with it.
Yeah. And Spence, we lining up so well. Like, the safety ranking for JT for me is just not there. I mean, look at his top 20 market is like a complete money hole. But top 10 and top 5s, you know, like that upside kind of stuff is really paying off for him. And he's won once in the last 12 months, and you've only won $10. Like, that just goes to prove how badly his price has been. You know, like, for one W in the last 12 months to only have profited $10 is absurd. So the course history here also, given his accuracy problems, Spence, is a big issue for me. You know, the driving of the golf ball, he's 37th in the field. Like, he's just on courses longer than 7,200 yards. He's 37th in this field, despite being so good out of the rough with the irons, so good around the greens. So typically, you know, you're seeing these hellish conditions where just getting up and down for 4 or par is exactly what JT can do. But I find it's difficult to have the upside that you need when you at a course that you have to hit these fairways, or at least have it a million miles down there. You know, it's tricky. So I agree. And what do you think is the reason for such pathetic performances at this golf course. I mean, 2020, when pretty much no one was watching, or who knows how many spectators we had, he finished 18th. But outside of that, it's been a really bad showing at Muirfield Village for Justin Thomas.
So there's two things I want to add to that. You talked about some of the accuracy concerns. These two metrics kind of go into the same area. So let's just take every single golfer that is $9,000 and up. We'll just use that as the threshold number on DraftKings. You look at strokes gained total at similar golf courses. So this was just me taking what I deem to be a similar golf course, weighing it out. There was only 2 golfers that ranked outside of the top 30 for me in that area. One of them is surprisingly Cantlay. It was the one area that my model didn't necessarily love Cantlay. And I understand that's a really weird answer to give for a golfer that has completely dominated at this course. And I think that's why the profile still grades him as a top 10 player. There is enough to like in the profile. But if you're looking at the downside marks in that area, Justin Thomas is 57th out of 72 players. Like everybody else is inside the top 20. And then if we want to circle back to some of those accuracy marks or just driving totals in general, $9,000 and up golfers, the worst player in my model would be Patrick Cantlay at 20th overall of that range. Still a decent enough return. Justin Thomas, 49th in expected driving here. I just think that those are the 2 marks that continue to plague him. And there is a lot to like in the Cantlay profile. Like if we're trying to compare the two, sorry, excuse me. I'm still trying to get over this little sickness I have.
I've been sick and coughing for the last 4 weeks. It's ridiculous. It just doesn't go away.
No, this has been lingering. Like I've had no voice now for, it feels like 3 weeks. And I keep waking up every single morning expecting it to be better. And it just never improves for whatever reason.
I feel you, dude.
But no, what I was going to say with Cantlay is there's a lot of high-end marks. Like if you look at any of the recent tee to green metrics for him and you gear it towards Muirfield, tons of stats that like him. Like Thomas just continues to lack in a lot of those areas. And I know he's been hot with the putter through stretches. He's going to have to be hot with the putter again to be able to make a push here. But he is probably, of all those names, 9,000 and up, one of the names that I am just definitely lower on.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's really weird how JT and the putters bailed him out so much. And I think that's great. And we've seen a similar thing with Scotty too. But Cantlay entering the week again, driving the ball really nicely. The ball striking is doing great. It's just he has been pathetic in the short game department. Like he just cannot figure it out. And he's typically really, really solid there. But he's been losing like quite a lot every tournament he's been playing. So yeah, if I were to pick, I would say back Kawa, surprisingly. And I know you do your long-term model, Spencer. Mine's now migrated to a 12-month, 8-month, 4-month, 2-month policy. So I'm kind of including the last 2 months 4 times, the last 4 months 3 times, the last 8 months twice, and then the last 12 months once. Just to try and get a feel for the momentum a golfer's game is producing, and it's Kawa is starting to, ever since he talked shit to the media, it's been a problem, but I feel like, maybe he's a little flying under the radar, like you mentioned this week, and I think that's going to be the case. Cantlay, I just can't trust right now. He's just not been playing good enough to, at courses that he's Harbour Town, T13, he's usually really at the top of the board there. Just not having his A game at places we should have expected that from him is a bit of a problem for me. So I'm in on Kawa, as the ownership suggests. He's going to be the second most popular player at the top of the board.
Yeah, and in fairness with Cantlay, like he is inside the top 10 of my model, but if I'm directly comparing him against names like Fleetwood, Connors, like those are 2 directions I would still rather go. I know we've talked a lot about those 2, and I'm sure we'll do more as the show goes on, but to me, he's just a neutral target. Like I don't have a strong take one way or another.
Cool. All right. I'm going to pop in another name here just so that we can chat about some options that I want to bet. Let's go with the top of the 8K range. We've got Victor, Sepp, and Shane Lowry. 3 very interesting options. Let's go from a DFS perspective, ownership included. With most of them pretty much Victor getting 5% more ownership than the other 2. So at 89, 88, and 87, back or 9, Victor Hovland, Sepp Straka, or Shane Lowry.
I will back Shane Lowry. My model really liked them this week, and my model is typically not one that tries to back him in a lot of spots. So when I see some of these profile outputs come out for him, it's always an intriguing outlook with him. So I'll back him. I'll say I'm neutral. I honestly I'm borderline neutral on both of those two. Like, there's not one that I'm necessarily out on. I think Hovland and Straka are very, very similar in different ways of how I'm building this. You look within my model, they're top 15 in all iterations of how I built it. Some of the safety marks, I guess, for Straka leads a little bit more of that boom or bust. And a lot of that just comes down to when we look at the recent results. Like, there's 20% of my weight in my model that looks at what somebody's done over the last 10 weeks. So if you look at Straka's profile, miscut win, 13th miscut, like that is going to weigh a little bit heavier for me in that area. I don't really have concerns with that. I know you have a very minor cut that you're going to have to get through, but I think the statistical profile for all three are honestly worth considering. Don't necessarily have any of those names that I am completely out on.
Kind of interesting to note that Sepp has had 2 wins this year and missed both cuts in the majors, which is kind of a salt and pepper type of a year, like someone having such a banner year. But granted, I mentioned this in the Discord. One of the guys, Golf Sicko, wanted to know if he wanted to go to Sepp, who I see is a popular outright this week. Most of Sepp Straka's finishes, Spencer, that he's had his wins at, they've typically come with really, really low scoring. Like when you're taking a look at his final positions here for Sepp, I'm going to pull it up here, and it's like minus 15 or better for pretty much every single one of his wins. Then he finished second at the Open Championship, but he has his 4 wins that I've got most recently, like minus 16th at the Truist. That's still pretty deep. Minus 10th at minus 10 at the Honda Classic, which took a tornado to blow Shane Lowry off the golf course and a Daniel Berger 5-shot meltdown for him to snag his first. Was that his first win on the PGA Tour at the Honda? Either way, minus 25 at the American Express, minus 21 at the John Deere Classic. Like those are some low scoring situations, and I just don't see that being the case at Muirfield. I just don't see him getting anywhere close to minus 10. So you think the kind of course setup for Sepp is a bit of a different situation than what he's had success on?
I think like Hovland and Straka, we can give the same answer for both. They are elite iron players. They are elite weighted proximity players within my model. Each one of them on similar golf courses, maybe in general, but on similar golf courses, the around the green metrics are usually what end up hurting them. It's funny you bring that up about Straka and the major championships. I think that Masters one was the one that burnt a lot of people too, because if anybody recalls out there, he was very popular. It was a name that a lot of people had. Maybe one of the most, I forget what his price tag was, but one of the most popular players on the slate. And he absolutely blew up on Thursday. Not Nick Dunlap blow up, but absolutely blew up. And he ended up putting the pieces together on Friday, made a big push to get himself inside of the cut line. I don't know if he went like bogey, double bogey, triple bogey. Like he blew it over the last couple holes, ended up missing the cut. I'm kind of willing to forgive him for that one just because of that reason. I think it was just a really bad start. But it's one of those courses, unfortunately, to where if he ends up missing greens in regulation, the downside is worse than a lot of these names that we could talk about. I just think that there is the spike potential for him, that if he gets extremely hot with the iron play, that there's other metrics that end up working for him. Like, even if you just look at similar putting totals on similar courses, but it's going to have to be second shot putter. If he doesn't put those pieces together, the downside is more prevalent than a lot of these names.
Yeah. He's 10th in this field in the last 36 rounds on bent grass from 5 to 15 feet. He's just locked in from that range. Now he's chipping. Will it give him a 5 to 15 footer for par, or will he have a 25 footer, around these tricky venues? I have 2 names I've bet in this back or nine category for us. And my first is Victor Hovland. I've bet him to win this tournament. I know, bet him at Bet365 with the 3 places. Victor is either going to be at the top of this board or he's not going to be remotely close. So I figured I'd take those 3 places each way, spicy up the number as well, and kind of just bank on his upside. Like if I'm taking a look at his upside ranking versus his safety, it's obviously not the greatest, either one of them in the model. But if you just think about who Victor Hovland is over his career, he's not necessarily been the most consistent dude. Like if you believe thoroughly in aliens, you're typically not going to show up with the same game plan every single week. And, Victor Hovland was going full Lindeque to death. Saw him on the driving range as the only person in the rain hitting drivers. Like of all the clubs to be hitting in the rain, like you're smashing driver. So Either that's going to work out wonderfully for us or it's not. But I'm going with him. He's obviously won this tournament before. Very comfortable winning golf tournaments for having already won this year. So, the upside is there. He's been a profitable outright bet in the last 12 months, given how bad his numbers are, typically out there. And then I'm going to go with Sugar Shane, top 20 plus 100. If you take a look at Shane Lowry's situation here, betting to win $100 every single week in Shane Lowry's top 20 market, he's returned you 456, almost $1,000 there for Shane Lowry, which I think is the perfect way to play Shane. The upside is just not there with the man. I bet him for top 20 in all 4 majors, Spencer. Heading into round 4 of the Masters, he was going to try and win the damn thing and then finish like 54th or something. Like I bought my father-in-law and my brother-in-law Christmas Shane Lowry and Colin Morikawa top 20 in each major, and it lasted 2 majors. Like Shane blew it up at the Masters and Colin completely butchered it last major. So times are tough, in the betting family household, yeah. But I think Shane for a top 20 is probably the way to go. Despite him not necessarily having the greatest track record, yeah, he does have 2 top 20s in his last 4 starts. So thoughts on either of those?
Yeah, Lowry for me was 12th overall from his grade. And what do you have him? You had him, I don't see it now.
His overall, like his safety is 5th for me. Like that's including the top 20, top 40 rates. And then the upside goes quite backwards there with the top 10s, top 5s, as you can see by the betting market as well.
Yeah, it's a very similar. I mean, I don't have him dropping as low as you do, but it's the same profile of the safety is better than the upside. Typically, that's where you want to target these guys in the top 20 markets. I think that makes logical sense. Hovland for me was a top 10 win equity player on the slate. I like Hovland, and it's like it kind of goes back to what I was saying with Straka. To me, it's the profile where when it booms, they're going to boom, and when they're bust, you're gonna look there on Thursday, and they are going to be at the bottom of the leaderboard. The one thing I will say to Hovland that my model at least has noticed historically is he's always bad around the green. But when you throw him at some of these courses that have extremely thick rough, and it's a punishing, damaging mark for everybody, it's not as glaring for him in those spots. Like he's still going to be bad, but the entire field is going to be bad in those spots because it's such a detriment to miss a green in regulation and have to scramble from that spot. So I trust Hovland's ability to hit more greens in regulation than most players on tour. And I do think at a course like this, there's a reason why he's found high-end upside in the past. You just have to know it's a boom or bust route with it. And I think the way you bet him has all of that built into it. You're not playing for the safety, you're playing for the upside.
There we go. I love it. We typically didn't agree that much back in the day, Spence, but having you on as a guest now instead of a co-host seems to have you being a lot more polite. So maybe you can really give me what your true feelings are as we go down the board here. Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, Tony Finau, $84, $83, $8,200. I will give you my Siwoo Kim bet for this week. Top 20 plus 105, ties paid in full. We are betting 2 units on that bad boy. Siwoo Kim, friends, if we take a look at his situation, I even have it saved as the preset for the default. Siwoo Kim is the best bet you could have made at the Memorial in the last 5 years. He's cashed that 5 of 5. He's been plus 130, plus 170, plus 900 back in 2020 when he cashed that top 20. This week, he's got the lowest top 20 odds of his career at this golf course, and rightfully so. We are checking a lot of boxes for Siwoo Kim entering the week. We got the course history, which would have cashed 5 of the last 5, like we've just mentioned, and 4 of the last 5 in recent form have been top 20s as well. Now, bear in mind, he's been in contention to win multiple of these tournaments and has finishes of 8th as his best final finish. He's just not getting across the line right now. So I love him for a top 20 bet. I'll be fading him as an ownership fade for sure in DFS. I just think the ownership's going to get out of control. Give me a Russell Henley, who I know can potentially win the tournament at $8,400 as my back in this range. Who are you backing between Russell Henley, Siwoo Kim, and Tony Finau?
I like Russell Henley and Siwoo Kim. I think the Tony Finau stuff, and maybe this is where I'm going to be a little outside of the box. He's a very popular name. I've seen that name also come up a lot. I know the recent results look like he's trending in the right direction. The course history leaves a lot of positives on the resume too, but I think we maybe have gotten a little too far ahead of ourselves with where we're at with Finau here. So I'll say 9 to him. Henley had one of the better upside profiles in my sheet. And I think if you're looking from a contrarian sense, that's certainly fine to consider Henley there. But I like Siwoo Kim maybe even more than you do. Like, I am kind of under the mindset right now. And there's a name I like that we skipped in the $8,000 section. Maybe this is where we can get different here. So we can go back to our old times of not like we're just agreeing on everything.
Just changing the question on me, adding a new name to the fray.
I think we have to add somebody new to get a different sort of a discussion here. But I'll say I'm backing Siwoo Kim. I bet Colin Morikawa at 18-1. I bet Siwoo Kim at 45-1. I bet one other name. There's one other name that's on my card this week. I would argue that he might be the best play on the entire board. I'm going to take Daniel Berger this week. I love him for DraftKings. I love him in the outright market at 40-1. One of the things that I talked about at the beginning of the show that I'm always trying to find are how did a player strike the ball in their last couple starts versus how did they perform with a putter versus what their baseline projection should have been. And I understand Daniel Berger's putter, as cold as can be, it is as cold as anybody on tour at this point. He's dead last in my model in projected putting, and there's a concern there. But Muirfield Village in general decreases putting returns in my sheet. Like, the dispersion of scoring when you look at just the putter is about 25 to 28%. That's usually like 35 to 42%. So it's the smallest weight that I have in my sheet for putting that of any tournament we almost get the entire year. And if you circle back to what happened last week, take him and take Aaron Rai. These are two names that burnt the industry. And I love Aaron Rai. There's a lot of different ways that you can consider playing Aaron Rai. Those were the two biggest underachievers that I had in my sheet, to where, yes, I understand the putter can go cold, but it was so much colder than it should have been. These were golfers that should have been inside of the top 25 of the leaderboard if you got any semblance of what is a neutral putter for them. And I don't mean neutral in the sense of like they're zero strokes. I just mean neutral of what they should be providing in a long-term perspective. And you talked about it at the beginning of the show, Byron, where Scotty in the past, and Daniel Berger is not Scotty Scheffler, I'm not making that argument, but where Scotty in the past has lost an egregious amount of strokes on the greens and was still able to produce a top 10 finish, a top 5 finish in those years. I think Berger's skill set, if you can even just give him an average putter, let him be at 0 strokes if we want to use those 0 stroke totals. The upside is really, really high here. And I'm probably going to have my most exposure to anybody to Daniel Berger. I never lay this much juice. I will give a bet on here on a round 1 matchup. I took, and maybe this might be where we differ too. I know this is a name that you generally like, but I laid minus 150 on Daniel Berger in round 1 over Justin Rose. This is just going to be an all-in Daniel Berger week for me. So I'm very aggressive to him. And as I said, once we move forward in this, Aaron Rai is a really strong candidate to put into builds also.
All right. Spence, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a big Rose truther in majors. I think we figured out what Netflix showed us. He just wants to win majors. And I was all in on him at the PGA Championship. I was in on Rose, Reed, and Russell. All three of those in the 8K range, kind of just building around the top there with Rory and Bryson. Disastrous. Totally disastrous. But hit me, I need a cough here. But Aaron Rai is a perfect round 1 option as well. By the way, Scotty Scheffler, round 1, top 10 after round 1 is minus 110 at BetMGM, plus 125 at DraftKings. I think that's a really solid way to kind of get involved in Scotty Scheffler at a price that is plus money in some, if you're taking the dead heats on at plus 125. I feel like he's not necessarily the guy that's going to go and blow first round leader out of the water, but he's always at the top of the leaderboard. So I feel like that's a definite way to kind of get involved with Scotty Scheffler there in round 1. But we're chatting about Aaron Rai. Let's just ditch the whole back and 9 situation. What about Rai? I'm thinking maybe a top 30 bet. I mean, what are we getting Rai on in the top 30 market? I'd probably imagine pretty close to plus money.
I do not have up in front of me.
Oof.
Yeah, I think anywhere in that. I mean, I'm even okay pushing it into the top 20 market. I think anywhere in that top 20, top 30 makes a lot of sense. There are some key statistics that I ran, and I called it key scoring. So essentially what that was is players that were most likely to be able to score on these par fives. That's kind of your most gettable holes, and the ability to avoid damage on those longer par fours. The ability to be able to put those pieces together were a lot of those golfers that work really well in that top 20, top 30 sort of a range. Aaron Rai was inside of the top 10 of my model for key scoring. The other metric that I at least would like to throw out there is they are generous fairways, and he's the number one total driver for me when you just look at pure accuracy. But when you do miss a fairway, I looked at rough proximity because I know these are tough greens to hit. They're very quick, but I wanted to figure out if the players did miss, how likely were you to be able to salvage a score? And Aaron Rai was third in my model in rough proximity. So you take the most accurate player that I have in my model, you mix it with the rough proximity. So you're going to expect him to hit a lot of fairways. And even when he misses, he's able to control the damage a little bit more than a lot of these players. This is just an ideal bounce back spot to where I think without that miscut, you're probably looking at a golfer. And I understand like the ownership is starting to trickle up a little bit. I only see 11% right now. I really think at this price tag last week, you probably have him at 20 to 30%. And you would have had a price tag, in my opinion, that's not $7,600. I think he's more of a standard $8,400+ golfer. So you're getting a rebate in the price, a rebate in the ownership, according to my model. I think you're getting a really good value play that honestly fits with any golfer, any build, any construction of how you're trying to do this.
Yeah, I think I might be landing on an Aaron Rai top 30. I'll lay the juice, Spence. I just feel like the safety you have from a ball striking standpoint, and he's the best putter in the field on bent from 5 to 15 feet. Yeah. Leads the field, and then he's 12th in strokes gained on bent grass. You know, like, he's not the greatest putter in the world, but he seems to thrive on bent. So, you know, love that. And then the bogey avoidance for him is fantastic. And like you mentioned, for someone that hits in the fairway as much as he does, he's absurdly good out of the rough from far. You know, his wedges aren't nearly on the same level. You know, from inside 150, he's 47th in what, a 72-man field. But he's fourth in the field in strokes gained out the rough from 150 and out. So that's where you're going to find all of your golf balls. You know, like the short shots you're going to have in are going to be layups on par fives, or you're hitting irons on those short par fours, you know, like to be in the fairway. So I think it's a great way to go about it. Would you go top 20 or top 30?
What is the top 20 price?
The top 20 price. Top 30 is minus 160. Aaron Rai, top 20 is plus 125.
I always lean, it's just the way that I build. I always lean to the more aggressive route. I always try to figure out what is the most aggressive I'm willing to push a player and then go in that area just because of the exposure that you end up landing. I mean, for me, and you kind of mentioned it with the putter, like one ideal bounce back spot after what he did last week. But if you just look at the putting return, and this is through a longer duration of time that I'm running things, out of 72 players, he's 55th in my model in strokes gained putting. You throw him on bent grass greens over a long-term perspective, he's 9th for me. So he's still within the top 10 there. If the putter ends up showing up with everything else we just talked about, like, this is a golfer that I think he can really start pushing up the board, and he kind of has that profile to where top 20 makes a lot of sense for how I would be trying to build it. And I tried to find a way to figure out a way to get a matchup with him. The market just was very aggressive with the way that they backed him against players, and I thought they did a good job with who they paired him against. And unfortunately for us, that's not a good answer. So for me, I'd probably just bet a top 20, play him in DFS, and try to get a bunch of exposure that way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's probably the most profitable top 20 bet you could have made outside of Andrew Novak, out of all people. You know, Aaron Rai's returned you $522 betting him top 20 to win 100 every single time he's played. So, you know, that makes and checks a lot of boxes. That Wyndham really doing a lot of work there for that win market. But shout out Max Grieseman on that one. So yeah, I'd like Aaron Rai. Did you say you're going to be playing him in DFS as well, even at 10%?
Yeah, I'm going to just be way above consensus on what he is. Like, I'll find a way to get massively above on both him and Berger.
Cool. I think, you know, if you're looking for some pivots, geez, I mean, Noren's exciting. I know he's your guy, Spence. Do you want to chat about Alex Noren a little bit? I have him in a season long with the Tour Junkies, in a season long like one and done types, not one and done, but your guy, what he earns that year, you make, and you draft like 10 or so guys. And I drafted Alex Noren, and then he immediately ripped his hamstring out of his leg for me. So he's back now and like made like a couple $100K right away in 2 starts. So he is not rusty whatsoever. And I feel like he's almost like Aaron Rye-esque in course fit, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on him at $7,400, 8% owned.
Let's look at the $7,700 golfers less. I will give you every single golfer for me that was a value compared to their price, because Alex Noren fits that answer there. So it was Robert McIntyre, it was Aaron Rye, it was JJ Spawn. I think Spawn is a really good DFS play also. Alex Noren, as you just mentioned, Andrew Novak. There are certain golfers, Novak, Michael Kim, Bud Cauley. These are names that the market continues to be way too low on, regardless of what they keep putting together there. Those are all names I would be considering. The other name that popped for me, which there is absolutely no ownership because of what he's put together, and I even myself being one of the biggest supporters of this guy, I can't get myself to do it. Wyndham Clark was a value. That might be some of the long-term data weighing itself into there. I'm just going to probably ignore that and just live to fight another day, because I don't know how many tournaments in a row I can get these egregious totals towards where I think my model has all this value on Wyndham Clark, and he misses every single cut. So, for DFS purposes, if you want to throw a dart in a tournament where most people make the cut, there are a lot worse ways to go. But the floor is last place there. But as far as Noren is concerned, I was kind of surprised to see, because of like the lack of data that we have been able to pull in from him. He was inside of the top 30 of my model for safety, even being out for all this time. And usually my model, when somebody's been out and doesn't have a lot of tournaments, usually wants to punish them for not having all those events. So for him to crack the top 30 while only having 2 tournaments on the resume recently, that kind of did speak to me there. Although, like, just as a cautionary tale to everybody out there, I don't think I've one time ever said a positive thing about Alex Noren, and he's actually provided a good result. So like, this might be last place for Alex Noren.
Hey, I think it's a great, he's played okay here too. We've got a couple solid finishes. I think it's a great place to return. How did he finish 17th the PGA? I thought the guy was like trying to win the damn thing. He was playing with Scotty. So just absurd to see how that went backwards for him. But again, that's the heat of the battle. You're going to get those reps as you play a little more golf. But I like him a lot. We're seeing a lot of ownership in this, not really much below 5% projected in the 7K range. There's only 70 people. But what's on Maverick McNeely, Spencer? I think he's someone I've always been like, I bet him one and done last week, and obviously he's had his first missed cut in forever. So that's just how my life is going. But what's on Mav? I think he's got insane upside.
I think he's good. I know there's a lot of names that I missed there. Like, he's one of the names that I would say great GPP leverage for the ownership that you're paying. He has positive win equity compared to what the number is, and a negative floor on a lot of that. And that's where like the ownership is low enough that I'm willing to take a chance on that. And when you can get these golfers that are, for him, I see about 5% ownership right now. That kind of puts him right in that range where he's one of the better contrarian options that you can consider because of that. It's essentially, if we're being honest here, it's the Wyndham Clark profile that my sheet keeps loving every single week. It's just actually with the golfer that's giving you more room for optimism. I know the last 3 results have left a little bit more to be desired, but you still have the 3rd at the RBC, you have the 3rd at the Valero. He is spiking in some of these elevated events. We almost saw him win when Oberg won at the beginning of, at the Genesis at the beginning of the year. He's one of those names that I don't know if I would be as aggressive as I would have been at the beginning part of the year, but one of the big arguments that I tried to make in one of the first articles that I had written was that if you're looking for 2 legitimate top 15 players in the world that are not viewed as such, I said Russell Henley and Maverick McNeely. Russell Henley is now viewed as such. Maverick McNeely is still not. So I think GPP-wise, certainly a lot worse ways that you can go. There's upside present there for a sub 5% golfer.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Didn't mean to throw you off on a total tangent there. And we're jumping around. First show, I've had a guest on. Still trying to figure out how to shove my bets down your guys' throats as we go along here. So I'm going to jump back up to Matty Fitz, 40-1, 8 places. I love him for an 8 places market. He has been relatively okay. That's not his greatest returns there, but I think I like him for a top 10 at this golf course. He's had a lot of top 10s at Muirfield. We've had 3 in the last 5 years for old Fitzy, and we're starting to see that form come back in play. I was taking a look at his tournament stuff, and I think his ball striking for Fitzy is really starting to like make its way back into the mix here. So over the last little while, Fitzy, the ball striking gained at the RBC Heritage, which he's played well at, and then gained at the PGA Championship. Quail's not like his greatest venue in the world, but still solid ball striking there. And then the short game's coming around a little bit too with around the green play. And then we've got him at Muirfield Village with this weird situation. Remember when he had like a career worst putting performance at a course that he's had like one of his better putting performances at as well? Just what the hell's this dude's deal? But I'm somehow on a guy who's blocked me on X. So I'm not even going to like post him, like tweet him if he wins. So shout out to him. But what's your thoughts on Fitzy?
I mean, I think for DFS, he's a complete fade. That would be the route I would be playing in there. You could talk me into other ways if you want to try to get exposure to him. But like, if we're looking for, my model deems it, I call it ownership versus model rank. Really what it is negative leverage. Like if we're looking for positive leverage of the McNeelys of the world, this would be the negative leverage part of the answer. Like the worst negative leverages that I have on the board would be Ricky Fowler, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Justin Rose, Max Homa, Tony Finau. I mean, that's the top 5 for me in that area.
Yeah. Ricky just continues to just find himself like thriving off of shit he did like 8 years ago. Like talk about like an annuity just paying off for a guy. Like Ricky Fowler is the poster child of that. But yeah, y'all can take your 8% Ricky Fowler and do what you want with that. I just, I'm out on this man. I can't do it with him, like you mentioned there. But Novak being 11% is also quite interesting, warranted though, according to the model. But if we take a look at Fitzy is just disgusting. I'm really taking a play on his like recent stuff and a little bit of the course history to kind of get him across the line there. But at 16%, I'm totally okay leaving him alone because I'm taking a shot on the upside of him in the outright market. And then, the safety is just putrid. We knew he could easily miss the cut this week. So I think he's someone I'm out on. And then I've bet Keegan. I just like him a lot, in the outright market at 71 with 3 places there on Bet 365. I think Keegan's, although he's like a safety guy in the model here, I think when he pops, he's like really, when he's inside the top 5, it's usually like a top 2, top 3. He's like right in the mix. He doesn't mess around. And I'm nitpicking names around here, but I like Keegan's total driving of the golf ball, Spence. He's one of the few guys that's inside the top 20 for me for distance and accuracy. There's really not that many. And as a result, on courses longer than 7,200 yards, he's 5th in the field in strokes gain on those long courses. He's the perfect driver of the golf ball for a course like this. So I think it's something that we can definitely take a look at. And then, the iron play is okay. It is what it is. But what really struck me about Keegan, and I know some people have mentioned that around the green play at this golf course isn't the best thing to kind of lean on. But if you're missing greens, it helps to chip well. And Keegan, I've got graded over the last 12, 8, 4, and 2 months as the best short game specialist in the field. So, like he's chipping his brains apart. I think at Valero, a lot of that was happening there. But thoughts on Keegan Bradley, Spencer, for the outright market here for captain?
I like Keegan. If we move it up to the $8,000 plus range of golfers, that's another name that was a value for me, even for like DFS purposes there. So I think Keegan's an intriguing name. The one thing I will say about Fitzpatrick, whether it ends up being right or wrong, is the profile. I'm not saying they're the same golfer, just the profile of what we're looking at looks very similar to Davis Riley last week. And that profile for DFS always scares me. Like I was out on Riley. I don't have a massive take because like some of the numbers, like Riley had this build or return inside of my model to where you see what he's done at the Charles Schwab in the past and you see the recent form and the numbers like him in that area. And then the statistical profile tells a completely different story where there's a concern. Like Fitzpatrick is not as brutal as that return was for Riley, but the ownership is kind of as brutal as it was in some ways. So that's my only concern for Fitzpatrick there for DFS is that I think you're getting one of those players where I don't know if the ownership is worth the squeeze of what you're having to actually put down, like what you're getting back. Doesn't mean that he can't find success. If he top 10s this tournament like he has in the past, it's certainly in the cards. Like there's a reason why he's nearly 20% owned. It's It's not people just making up reasons to play a golfer. Like, there is a profile that makes sense for him here, but that would be my 2 cents, that he may be getting a little bit too much weight there for the quote unquote challenging scoring answer that people are going to point towards.
Yeah. And if you just take away the last month of golf, people aren't playing him.
Ever.
You know, like,
I was playing him and I was incorrectly playing him, unfortunately. I missed all the run.
You know, so that's just the thing. Like, how much is what he's done so recently really going to predict where he's going to go forward? So we'll see. I prefer like Denny McCarthy as a pivot off of him in this range. I know Kenny's a big fan of Ben Griffin at $7,800, thinking you'd be a little less popular. People obviously still totally cool going back to a guy. I guess it depends what kind of guy you are. If you're Brooks Koepka and going and doing like a million lines of coke and hitting up NHL games, or your name's Ben Griffin and you went to the library to celebrate with your girlfriend, like there's different things going on here. So, you know, I think he's going to show up pretty sober and ready to rock and roll. But a little sneaky name as we get out of the 7 is Bobby Mack for me. He's someone I'm in the mood for. I got him at 3% last week, Spencer and Kenny. Wow, that's a Freudian slip if I've ever had one. But Spenny, that's a really weird one. 3% in a DK lineup, you know, for a $9,400 golfer, I think was his price. Like, that's absurd to think about, but that's neither here nor there. And also Wyndham Clark, Spencer, $7,200, like, and 4% owned as well. It's not even like his chalk. So that's just hilarious to see. In the 6s, I'm going to lead it off with Mackenzie Hughes. He started to find the driver a little recently, then I tweeted about it, and then he completely fell off the wagon with the driver. So I might just leave him alone on the social media side of things there. But I think at $6,800, he's got some potential. So he'll be one of my favorite 6K options. By the way, that's all my bets. So Victor Hovland, 45-1, Fitzy, 40-1, Keegan Bradley, 70-1 with the 3 places, all of those. Siwoo Kim, 2 units for a top 20. Scotty Scheffler, top 5, minus 160. And then Shane Lowry, top 20, plus 100. And then that Scotty Scheffler first round, top 10 as well at plus minus 110 on BetMG. So those are the bets for back 9 bets this week. In the 6K range, Spence, any names that you are kind of fancying down at the bottom here? These are the guys that make or break these lineups, you know, where the ownership's lowest.
Maybe this is an incorrect take that unfortunately ends up burning me, but I am going to play Bud Cauley this week, even with the ownership. I know we try to avoid, you and I maybe more so than a lot of people, of a lot of these chalky low 7s, $6,000 golfers, but to me, it's just a misprice. Like, I still think he's super playable, and there's a very high chance that he ends up being one of the more optimal routes to go. But with that being said, if you are trying to find ways to get different, I do like Sam Stevens. I have him at 4%. Michael Kim is one of my model's best plays. I have him at 5%. I kind of like Eric Cole a little bit. From an overall perspective, remove Bud Cauley from the mix because he was just so in a different playing field than everybody else. Those 3 names that I just mentioned were my model's favorite 3 values. So I will be finding ways to get those 3 into different builds. Some of them a little bit safer than others, some of them with a little bit more upside, but all of them names that my model seems to like a lot more than consensus this week.
Yeah, and I think you know, like in these weird balanced signature event fields, you've almost got to like take a really hefty stand at the bottom if you're really looking for like ultra leverage, right? Because we don't really have any like single figure names that you can really take a flag plant on over there, you know? So it's going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds. But if you were to pick one person that wins from the 6K range, Spencer, who is that?
Probably Bud Cauley, which is a boring answer to give, but I mean, Bud Cauley's profile is just so leaps and bounds in front of everybody else's in my sheet. Like, I have him $1,000 plus mispriced. Like, I think he's more. It's the Eric Cole answer, if we're being honest, of what Eric Cole dealt with a year and a half ago, to where result after result, and the odds board doesn't want to move him. And the Andrew Novak answer is starting to become the same thing there. But you know, I gave the answers of the worst leverage on the board, the negative leverage. The best positive leverage of all these names down in this section. Talked about Eric Cole, Wyndham Clark. My model is always going to like Wyndham Clark, so take that for what it's worth. Sam Stevens, Jonathan Vegas, and then Maverick McNeely, the two names that are in the $7,000 range, which, I mean, if I'm being honest, I haven't really even given them that much thought myself, but for them to have this much leverage in my sheet at this point, it's at least worth mentioning. Sam Burns and Minwoo Lee seem to, from a leverage standpoint, be interesting for what their potential seems to be inside of my sheet. You got to take that with a grain of salt because it's going to be a little bit more volatile profiles with those two. But in a no cut, well, it's a cut, but in a top 50 out of a 72-man field, if you can get yourself into the cut, you know, there's a way to work yourself up the leaderboard on Saturday and Sunday to where all of a sudden Sam Burns top sevens this, maybe not even while being in contention. Same with Minwoo. So just names that, I mean, honestly, I'm just throwing out there right now as names that I hadn't even considered to this point of running new ownership projections and seeing, oh, well, there's a little bit of leverage there.
Somehow my camera has moved me entirely like out of the frame over here. So I need to like shift over 1,000,000 miles. I don't know what's happened. I think it's thundering and Ernie's under the table now and he's moving the camera on me. But Spence, thank you.
Thanks
Byron, for being on the show with me. By the way, people, go check Spencer out on Mayo Media Network here after this. He's going to be doing King of the Draft with Joel. And you got Jeff Feinberg on there doing all of that jazz. I felt so good, Spence, about my lineup. And some guy even like decided to like tweet at me. And it wasn't like a reply. It was like his tweet was like, Byron, or at the Model Maniac, congrats on having 4 of your 6 guys miss the cut. You suck. Or so like, it was like, I was like, where's this unsolicited stuff? And I remembered I was on the draft. And I felt so good about that team. But man, that PGA was like so random. So many good names totally just did not play well last week. But any final parting thoughts for the week coming up, Spence?
Well, I'll say this about the show. If it makes you feel any better, all the guests that we've had on seem to be off to a slow start with it. So we'll have to have you back on. And that's something for anybody who wants to just follow along. It's a really fun show that Joel Schreck and I do. We're going to have Jeff Feinberg on it, as Byron just said. For those who have not watched, and it is on Mayo's network, it's going to be on in 50 minutes at this point. It's a live draft where you draft against myself, Joel, and Jeff, and a weekly guest every single week. And what we're trying to do is it's a snake draft style to where you have a $50,000 budget, just like you have on DraftKings. You can only take a player one time. So there's very unique roster constructions that end up taking place with it. And you get different outputs. And specifically for a tournament like this, where there's only 72 players, you're going to get a much different outlook of lineups there. So the audience is always competing against us. The audience gives their suggestions for their picks. We keep tabulations and tally now, and it's something that I put into the description of the video, and I'm going to have that in every single week to where we will have all the guests that have been on, the totals that they have put up. It's essentially you get 3 points if you win, 2 points if you come second, 1 point if you come third, 0 points if you come fourth. If your lineup cashes in any of those big $5 tournaments with like 20,000 plus people, you get an extra point for it. So we're going to have a little bit more. We've gamified this, Byron, to where everybody's going to be able to see. So we will have you on very shortly to be able to make up for what happened at the PGA Championship. But yeah, if you're not doing so already, you can also find me on Twitter at TF Sports. You can get my model or any of the stuff that we talked about on this show over at Rotoballer. And, Byron, you and I have been doing this for a very long time together. It's always a pleasure being able to jump on here and talk to you. And if you're not doing so already, be sure to check Byron's stuff on Patreon. This is, there's, as you can, maybe you can't tell on this show because we are so in lockstep with everything we said, but you usually get very differing views from the two of us, but you get it in a very sophisticated way and approach. And it's all data driven and it's all metrically driven in it. So, there's a lot of different ways to approach these weeks. And I think you and I, we do it differently. We do it the same in some ways, but they're both very useful in different areas there.
Yeah, we do a lot of similar stuff, Spence, but somehow land up with different answers in a weird way. I think that just goes to show like models are models, like people put the stuff in, but what it kicks out is up to you. And you can like almost also interpret the same results of a model in a different way, depending on how you like want to, like numbers are objective, but there is a subjective portion to this. And I subjectively decided to just not even bring up Profit X, who the show is sponsored by, for the entire show. So while we were chatting here, Spence, I popped out an Aaron Rye to shoot over 72.5? I said no. So if you guys want to come take my money, I gave you plus 100. It's right there. You can get the other side for plus 100. And if you're a new, use code FG Degenerates, and you won't even pay the juice because 1.5% of that goes right back into your bank account after each play for the first 30 days, up to $200. So it's kind of fun to be doing these markets. Spence, if you were to pick one for the late group over here, who would you kind of lean into as an over or under for, what's the par? 72? So you got to shoot over or under par, yeah. Is it 72?
Yes. I mean, I will say this. I don't think anybody's taking Nick. Nick Dunlap's going to probably shoot a 90. So.
Ooh. To shoot over 73. Yes. All right. Let's put that out there. I'll drop 125 out there, give you guys plus 125 if you're in the mood. I think that's a great play, Spence. To shoot 4 over around a golf course with the driver that Nick Dunlap's wielding like a drunk sailor, it's quite absurd. What do you think's happened with him?
I gave this answer when we did my King of the Draft show, and I'm not proud of this wager. And sometimes this is where you're just trying to find value. But I took Dunlap a couple of weeks ago. I took him in the outright. I took him at 1,000 to 1 is I think what I got him at, and I took him against Matthew Pavon at I forget what it was, a relatively high plus number there. And Dunlap was winning through 3 rounds. And then fortunately the driver did what the driver does for him, and he blew up. And, where is he? Like, this is the surprising thing. And maybe this is the long-term data coming into play. Like, my model, probably of any model in the entire world, is higher on Nick Dunlap, I would say, than consensus. There's 72 golfers in this tournament. Where do you have Nick Dunlap ranked?
I got him safety 68th, and upside I got him 62nd. And
So
there's 72 people in this field.
So we're close, I guess. I mean, I don't have him higher than like substantially higher, but I have him 57th. And then I have him 65th for any of those safety marks, which, I mean, the safety's probably dead last if we're being honest.
Look, I'll take Nick Dunlap over Brandt Snedeker like any day of the week. I just don't know. What is he doing in this? Like, what is he doing in a field like this? I understand the sponsor stuff, but Jesus Christ, like, it's just some of these sponsors invites just drive me nuts as well. But that I don't make those decisions. But
there's so many players in quality form that would bring a lot to this field, and unfortunately, and I hope Snedeker proves us wrong and Snedeker puts together a performance. I mean, good for him to be able to get himself into it, but this is not golf of 2012 anymore. It's a different viewership audience. Like, I mean, this is like a ridiculous statement, but I really think a lot of people that are new into golf like barely know who Brandt Snedeker is. Like, the one thing that golf has done and successfully has done, which is why I jumped into it and quit all the other sports that I was doing and focused solely on golf, is gambling started to become more prevalent and relevant. And when you have the betting acumen and people want to start gambling on it, you bring in a brand new group of people. It's not your father's friends and all the people that, like, you have a different background in golf than I do, Byron. You approach it from, you played golf. At least at the very starting point. Like, you started watching golf because you enjoyed playing it. You enjoyed watching it. I jumped into golf because, I mean, honestly, I enjoyed the statistical profiles of it, even dating back to like when I got super into the weeds of it in like the early 2010s with it. But a lot of people that have jumped in more recently that are the younger audience, like, they don't know who Brandt Snedeker is. Like, you can, I don't think he does anything in the field. Ricky, I understand more so. He gets himself in because people still like him, but Snedeker
but
doesn't
it's all like the 40-year-old dads walking around in bright, full orange outfits that like him. Like, no one knew. Like, anyone that graduated since 2020 doesn't know who, like, they know who he is, but they don't know why all these like old people are rocking these orange outfits,
Well,
like,
it's Anthony Kim when Anthony Kim went over to live. Like, the older school people, which I never quite jumped into that. I was never an Anthony Kim guy, but all the older school people are like, oh, Anthony Kim, this is a great addition. Where any of the new people are like, who the hell is this?
I know. And that's just the thing, Spence. And you know what also drives me nuts about these sponsors invites is that you're getting these FedEx Cup points for a sponsors. Like, Brandt has got no business earning a single FedEx Cup point this week. He hasn't earned a spot in this field whatsoever from a like meritocracy standpoint. Whatever dollars he earns, I'm totally cool. Like if he wins this tournament and he wins $3.6 million, cool. That makes no difference to anyone else apart from who's in the field. And ultimately, that doesn't secure your card for you at the end of the year because he should deserve no points. And what that would help with is, like, for instance, Ricky. If he doesn't earn any points, he's just been playing all these signature events on the sponsors' invites. Like, if you're putting Ricky alongside the likes of Brian Campbell, Joe Highsmith, no, I'm joking. But, like, we got Scotty, Xander, JT, Colin, Cantley, Tommy, Ludwig. Ricky alongside them is adding a bit of value, but it's adding like a smidgen of value. If he is forced to play in the other tournaments that he should be playing in without these sponsors' invites, getting him all of these signature field FedEx Cup points, Ricky alongside Joe Highsmith, Brian Campbell, etc., is a much bigger draw. Like the value he provides to the tournament in the shittier fields overall from a macro perspective for the PGA Tour is a better decision, in my opinion. Why are they trying to force him into all these big name fields blows my mind. Like Rory skipping out this week isn't that big of a deal, in my opinion. You know, like there's so many big names that we still can watch. Him being in the RBC Canadian Open is going to completely change how that field is viewed and watched, you know, over the weekend. So I don't know. I just figured I'd mention that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on these fake points that Ricky's earning all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love that either. And it's the kind of a similar argument that I made last year to where Minwoo Lee was I think a rising star is a fair way to describe him. And there's a lot of people who like him. He has his legion and all the people that come out in the chef caps. And he got himself into the TGL. And this was a name that unfortunately was not getting the sponsor exemptions last year. And we were giving it to the Webb Simpsons of the world. And everybody knows how much I love Webb Simpson. And I just don't think that they necessarily bring anything to the table from what is perceived. And, you know, there's people calling shots that make a lot more money, and there's people calling shots that have a lot more say, whether that be former players or just people that are trying to help out their friends and kind of just give them a pass in those situations. But I mean, if you're looking for like the most informed golfers who are not in this tournament, you have Brandt Snedeker, who's going to be 1,000 to 1+ to win this. I'm just going to throw out a random name. Like Ryo Hitsatsune, Harry Hall. These are names that are at least would be, I don't know, 150 to 1, 200 to 1 that have some semblance of a chance to actually get across to the winner's circle. Like they probably still don't do it, but their form is good enough to potentially put the pieces together. And for more so than anything, give themselves another chance to earn a lot of points and then catapult themselves into an opportunity to play all these events. Look at what Andrew Novak has been able to do. Look at what JJ Spawn has been able to do this year. I know Spawn, we're still like waiting on some of the stuff, but like Spawn almost won at the Players Championship and now he's in all these events. And I think from a DFS answer, he's one of the better values that you can have on the board because of that reason. So, you know, it unfortunately, if we're just looking for betting or for DFS, it makes these boards inferior. That is not good for anybody because, I mean, unless you're the biggest Brandt Snedeker fan, you're not adding value to this field for betting, for DFS, for anything. You're taking a 72-man field. Like what is Snedeker's ownership right now?
1%. So someone is playing Brandt this week.
Snedeker is going to be 1% owned. Like this is my prediction. He's going to be 1% owned in like the $5 20,000 person contest. Yeah. He's going to be 0.00000% owned in any of those sharper, you know, single entry $800 sort of builds where there's like 500 people in it. And you're going to see where the difference in ownership ends up being. Like nobody's going to play in there.
No, it just makes no sense. But our final question here from Wheels Up as we are getting out of here. Who is this week's mastermind play that everyone wants to play, but who is the guy that everyone assumes is going to do well? Okay, we're asking the same question there in the same sentence. But he's actually very likely to miss the cut and kill a DK lineup. So chalk bomb, essentially, right? Like who's your one guy, Spence?
You're not going to like this answer. I'm going to say Matthew Fitzpatrick.
Hey, I would answer the same. But if it's not going to be Fitz, I'm betting him outright. I'm not betting him top 40 or top 20 or anything like that. I think he's boom or bust. And at 16% ownership, I'm totally cool leaving that alone. My my option is going to be Xander. I think at 19% owned, at second most expensive option in the field, he's gonna show us his second top 10 at this venue in his career when he's been playing fantastic, and his second top 10 this year. Now, I'd rather be late on him than early, in my opinion, and the course history just not nearly there for him. So those are two solid options there for Matty Fitz and Xander getting the hell out of here. I'm sitting like clear on the other side of my desk right now to finish out the show, Spence, but thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. I love doing shows with you, and we did good to get done in hour 20. So let the people know what's going on over at Rotoballer.
Yeah, I think we've mastered this after years of doing shows together to get it sub an hour and 30 minutes. And in fairness, we're not off the air yet. These things seem to linger on longer than they sometimes even necessarily should. But yeah, we have a lot going on at Rotoballer. We have great content that's put up there. Joe Idoni, Joe Nicely, myself. There's a bunch of Ians on the team that put up great work. Matt Miller. We have a really strong unit over there. You can go check out any of that work. We have a bunch of different packages to consider, whether that's through weekly, yearly, different sectors, whether you just want mine, you just want theirs. Like there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but I would love, if you're not doing so already, to check it out. And I mean, I will throw this out there, Byron, because it does include you in this. I can say that we have a lot of great things going on at Rotoballer, and you were a part of that for a very long time. And you helped to build a lot of what we have going on there. Like your footprints are still felt within that company. And I will say, just to toot our own horns for a second, 3 of the last 4 FSWA winners have come from there. And 2 of them are sitting right here. So yeah, a lot of good things going on.
I know. 2 writers doing a podcast. What more could you ask for? And that is absurd. Congrats again, Spence. I mean, there's not a lot of people that win 2 FSWA awards, usually it's a one-off type situation because there's so many good content creators out there that write so many fantastic articles. So for you to have snapped that twice, I know you've had a couple nominations that let you down, and you kind of hard on yourself. I know how you get when these things happen, and I'm happy that it worked out perfectly for you. And yeah, I had such a blast with you guys at Rotoballer. Just one thing led to the next, and I got a great opportunity to do what I'm doing 100%. Now, and I miss you guys dearly. And you never know how the world unfolds going forward, and we'll be hanging out a lot. I'm going to have you on as my guest on the show quite often. As my backup, like if someone bails on me, no, I'm just joking. I'll get you scheduled for some big ones, and we'll do a couple with Keith. Maybe for the majors, yes. We'll do the 3 of us like we used to do in that department there for sure. And to the guys in the chat, I understand you were a little neglected tonight. Spencer got most of my attention, but you guys were fantastic as always. I'm going to be doing some single shows as well. I'm going to be doing guests. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I might actually go back to my Back Nine Bets channel and do my Sunday night research shows where I'll be going back and forth with you guys on the weekend. Sunday night. Leading up to the tournament, kind of doing the show I used to do on here on Sunday nights, and then having a bit more guests on this show. We'll see. If it sticks, it sticks. If you guys dig it, ultimately, it's up to you to decide how many likes, how many comments this video kind of gets. So let me know if you want other guests on here as well. Send some names, and I'll get those guys on if I can. Make some big names out there so I can say the chat wanted you and not just me. I would be easier to sell to those people. But go check out ProfitX, people. Go check out the Model Maniac Patreon. Use code Memorial25 for 25% off over there. Got lots of good stuff for you guys. Spencer, thank you so much for joining me on the inaugural guest show outside of the Pat Mayo episode 100. This is the next guest I've ever had on the show. So it's kind of weird, but couldn't have wished for anyone else to be on here.
Thank you, Byron. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. Anytime also.
Awesome. All right, folks. We'll catch you guys later. Have a great rest of your week.